You don't give someone your entire life and expect to be erased like a chalkboard. That's not how motherhood works. But it took me 71 years and one Christmas dinner to realize that love and sacrifice aren't always remembered the way you hope. My name is Elva Madigan. I've survived droughts, back pain, and losing the only man who ever understood me. But nothing prepared me for the quiet moment when I realized my son no longer saw me as family, but as a formality. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just smiled and made a decision I never thought I'd make. Some stories are born out of rage, but this is a revenge story, born out of love so deep. It refused to be buried beneath silence. Yeah. The first almond tree we planted was crooked. Bill and I argued over which way it leaned. He said west, I said south. He was probably right, but he let me win that day. We were 27 and stupid in love, kneeling in dry Central California dirt with calloused hands and no money to our names. That tree never did grow straight, but it bloomed every spring for 40 years, just like we did. In our way, people like to think women like me get tired, that by 71, we're supposed to be winding down, baking cookies, wearing support socks, and clinging to memories. But the truth is, I didn't feel old, not in the way people think. I still knew how to drive a tractor. I still did my own pruning. My knees ached like hell in the mornings, but I moved through the orchard like I belonged to it, because I did. After Bill passed away, I stayed on the farm. Everyone assumed I'd sell the land, maybe move closer to the city. Modesto's too quiet for someone alone, they'd whisper. But I wasn't alone. I had the trees, the house we built with our bare hands, and Seth, my son, my only child, my pride, my worry, my weakness. When Seth came to me 3 years ago and said he wanted to take the family farm into the modern era, I listened. I wanted him to feel like the land still had a future, even if my body didn't. So I agreed to shift partial ownership, 60% of the land, into his name. It made the banks happy. Helped him secure a small business loan for soil tech upgrades and solar paneling. He told me he'd keep the original farmhouse intact. He promised. And I believed him, because that's what mothers do when their sons say things with a smile. He moved his family into the newer guest house, Rachel, his wife, and the twins, Megan and Reed. I stayed in the old house, the one with the fireplace we built stone by stone, the one that smelled like almond blossoms and cinnamon in winter. I didn't mind the space between us. I liked having my own rhythm, my own rituals. Coffee at 5, check the irrigation at 6, prune by 8. It gave me purpose. It gave me peace. Every Christmas, I made the same spread, herb roasted chicken. We're not turkey people. Buttermilk biscuits, pecan pie, and my mother's cranberry orange relish. Seth would tease me about the relish every year. You know, no one eats that stuff but you, Mom. And I'd say, then I'll have plenty of leftovers. That was the rhythm, too. The teasing. The small familiar jabs that told me we still understood each other. Last year, he let me host the dinner in my home. It was messy and crowded and perfect. The twins spilled hot chocolate on the rug. Rachel complained about the thermostat, and Seth carved the chicken too early. But we laughed. We were together. We were family. But this year, things felt different. Seth sent a text instead of calling, said they'd love to host Christmas dinner at their house this time, asked if I could bring dessert, no cranberry relish, just pie. When I replied asking what time I should come by, he sent back, anytime after 3 is great. We're doing cocktails at 4 and dinner at 5. Hope that's okay. It wasn't a big thing, not on its own, but something in my chest felt tight when I read it. Still, I told myself not to be sensitive. Maybe they wanted to try new traditions. Maybe I was just tired. I baked 2 pecan pies, one with bourbon, one without. I wrapped them carefully in foil and packed them in a box with my old pie server, the one with the etched handle. I wore my holiday apron, the red one with embroidered almonds on the hem. Bill bought it for me on our 35th Christmas together. I did my hair, dabbed on lipstick, and slipped on the pearl earrings he gave me the year before he died. I wanted to feel like me. When I walked up the gravel path to Seth's house, the first thing I noticed was the cars. A dozen of them. Some I didn't recognize. Friends from Fresno. Business partners. A couple from LA. All parked across the front field like the place belonged to someone else. I knocked on the door. Balancing the box on one arm, Rachel opened it with her usual tight smile. "Oh, hi, Elva. You're early." Text said anytime after 3. "It's 3:15, I said, trying to keep it light. "Right. Of course." She took the pies and walked ahead without offering to help. I followed her through the hall, where garlands hung like hotel decor, and the scent of cedar clashed with whatever lavender thing she sprayed on everything. And then I saw the table. 12 chairs, all filled or clearly marked with name cards, Rachel's parents, some friends, the twins, even Megan's new boyfriend. But nowhere, not a single folded card, said Elva. It was like my name had been erased. I stood in the doorway, coat still on. My chest tightened. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter blurred. I scanned the table again, hoping, no, begging for a mistake, a missed spot, a folded napkin where my card had fallen. But there was nothing. Just like that crooked almond tree all those years ago. I was off kilter, except no one was arguing which way I leaned. They'd all agreed I didn't belong at the table. And that was when I knew something was very, very wrong. I don't remember when I stopped breathing. Maybe it was when I saw the 12th chair. Maybe it was when Rachel turned and said, "Why don't you just settle on the porch? We've got heaters out there." She smiled like it was a generous offer, like I should be grateful to sit in the cold while everyone else toasted inside. I didn't move. I just stood there, still in my coat, still holding the memory of a home I thought was mine. Seth glanced over his shoulder and said, "Mom, you okay?" His voice was casual, too casual. He knew. He had to know. "There's no seat for me," I said, quietly, like I was asking for confirmation of the obvious. Seth rubbed the back of his neck. We weren't sure you'd want to sit through a long dinner this year. Didn't you say something about not wanting to eat heavy meals anymore?" "No," I said. "I didn't." Rachel picked up the end of a garland that had drooped and adjusted it like it was more important than what was happening. It's just that we had more guests than we expected. And, well, space is tight. I looked around the room. There was space, plenty of it. They'd brought in a second table. There were folding chairs, extra place settings on the buffet. They just hadn't included one for me. I could sit at the kids' table, I offered, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Or I could just... "Oh, no, Rachel said, stepping toward me. "We already set that up in the den. It's a little full. We thought maybe the porch would be more comfortable for you. It's got a view of the orchard. That's nice, right?" The orchard, my orchard. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about oversight. This wasn't a last-minute miscommunication. This was calculated, planned. I wasn't just forgotten. I was removed. The worst part, Seth didn't argue. He didn't step in. He didn't say, "Of course we saved you a seat." "Mom," he let it happen. He watched. I looked at the pies I'd brought. One was already unwrapped, the foil crinkled and tossed carelessly aside on the kitchen counter. "I think I'll go," I said. Rachel blinked. "Oh, really? But we haven't done gifts yet." "Apparently, I'm not on that list either," I said. Turning toward the door, Seth followed me into the hallway. "Mom, come on, don't be like this." "Like what?" I asked. Like a woman who thought her son still wanted her here. He sighed. "You're reading too much into this." "No," I said, my voice low but steady. "I'm finally reading it for what it is." He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "You know," I added, "you could have just said it, that you don't want me here, that you're done with me. At least then I wouldn't have dressed up." "I didn't say that." "No, you didn't. You didn't say anything. That's the part that hurts." I opened the door, cold air brushing my face. Christmas music played somewhere behind me. People were laughing. "You forgot me," I said. "You forgot who I am." He didn't answer. He just stood there, fidgeting like a boy caught with a lie he thought would never come to light. Outside, the sun was setting. The almond trees cast long shadows across the dirt, reaching like hands towards something they couldn't quite touch. As I stepped off the porch, I heard Ethan, my grandson, call after me. "Grandma, where are you going?" I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Back in my car, I sat in silence for several minutes. I didn't cry. Not yet. I stared at the windshield as if answers might form in the frost. They didn't. Instead, something inside me shifted. The kind of shift you don't feel all at once. It was like the ground under your feet, moving just enough to make you doubt your balance. Viewers, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that quiet ache of realizing you're not part of your family's story anymore? Not with drama, not with a fight, just with silence. That kind of pain, it doesn't shout, it sinks. If you've ever been there, I see you. You're not alone. I drove back to the old house, the one Bill and I built when Seth was still small enough to need a nightlight. It looked different now, older, emptier. Inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my coat. I just sat on the edge of the couch and tried to remember the last time I felt like I mattered to my son. I couldn't. The phone buzzed with a text. "Sorry. Mom, hope you're okay. Love you." 3 lines. No explanation. No apology. Just enough to check a box that said, "I did my part." I stared at those words for a long time. "Hope you're okay." I wasn't. And that was the moment I stopped hoping things would get better on their own. That was the moment I understood. If I didn't do something, I'd keep shrinking until I disappeared completely. I stood up, walked to the hallway, and opened the drawer where we kept all the important documents. Deeds, titles, tax records. There was one folder missing, the one with the house documents. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. Maybe it had been moved. But I always kept things in order. Always. That's when something else settled in my stomach. Something heavier than hurt. Something more terrifying than being forgotten. A question I didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. What else had Seth taken, besides my place at the table? The next morning, I woke up before the sun and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a piece of toast I didn't eat. The pie carrier was still sitting on the counter, one pie untouched, the other half eaten, its foil pulled back like a wound. I had spent all night trying to talk myself down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just one bad evening. Maybe the missing folder didn't mean anything, but I didn't believe that, not deep down. After Bill passed, I handled every legal detail myself. I'd kept that file, the property deed, the land transfer agreements, the trust documents in the same drawer, tucked between 2 red binders labeled taxes and wills. I'd touched them 100 times over the years. They had always been there, until now. So I did what any woman does when her gut tells her something is wrong. I started digging. I logged into my online property portal, something I hadn't checked in months. It took me 3 tries to remember the password. When I finally got in, my heart sank like a stone in cold water. The ownership had changed. I was no longer listed as the primary holder of the house. Seth was, and the change had been made 2 weeks ago. There were digital signatures on the file. Mine. Apparently, the notary listed was someone I didn't know. The title transfer had gone through clean, legal, irreversible. I sat there staring at my name printed in faded gray, like a ghost of a person who used to matter. He didn't just forget to save me a seat at dinner. He sold my house out from under me. I closed the laptop and just sat there for a while, trying to breathe. The next thing I did was open the cabinet beneath the sink and pull out a plastic tub marked receipts. I dug through it with shaking hands, flipping through envelopes and old utility bills. In the back, folded inside a tax return from 2017, I found a thin letter with a logo I didn't recognize. It was a title insurance confirmation, dated 2 months ago. My name was on it. The wording was formal, distant. Dear Mrs. Elva Madigan, this letter confirms that the title transfer on parcel 0493372 has been finalized. The property is now held in full by Seth Madigan, as recorded on file with the Stanislaus County Recorder's Office. My signature was at the bottom, but it wasn't mine. I knew how I signed my name. Looped. long strokes, trailing off slightly on the G. This one was stiff, too tidy, a forged attempt at familiarity. Someone had practiced. I picked up the phone and called Seth. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. So I drove. The main road was still wet from the night's rain. The orchard shimmered in the morning light. Rows of trees standing tall. Unaware that something sacred had just been broken. As I passed the south lot, the one Bill and I had planted the year after Seth was born, I noticed a new sign staked in the ground. Future site of Madigan Acres. Luxury agri-stay villas. Coming spring 2026. I pulled the car over so fast I nearly skidded into the gravel shoulder. I got out and walked toward the sign like I was walking toward a funeral. The kind you weren't invited to. The rendering showed white bungalows, modern decks, outdoor fire pits. Nothing of our home, nothing of the land we had loved like a child. I stood there for, I don't know how long, minutes, hours. A part of me wanted to rip the sign out of the ground. Another part just wanted to sit in the dirt and let it swallow me whole. When I finally reached Seth's house, I knocked once. Rachel answered. "Is Seth home?" I asked. She blinked, eyes narrowing slightly. "He's on a call. Tell him his mother's here." Her expression didn't change. "He's busy. Can I help you with something?" I took a deep breath. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't find out? Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "I don't know what you're talking about, Elva." "You do," I said. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." She didn't let me in. She didn't even pretend to invite me inside. She just stood there in her expensive cardigan, blocking the doorway of the house I used to own. "I want the original documents returned. The ones Seth took from my drawer." "That's a serious accusation," she said lightly. "Do you have proof?" "I will," I said. Her smile faded. I walked back to the car. That was the moment everything became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a son under pressure. This was a coordinated, deliberate betrayal, an erasure. They weren't waiting for me to die. They had already decided I was gone. And the worst part, they thought I wouldn't fight back. They believed I'd sit quietly on the porch while they passed around wine glasses and sold off everything I'd built with my own 2 hands. But they forgot something. I'm still Elva Madigan. I buried a husband. I raised a child alone. I ran a farm through droughts and debt and frost that broke half the trees one spring. I don't scream. I don't make a scene, but I don't disappear. I went home and pulled out a notebook. I made a list. Names, dates, file numbers. Every time Seth had used my trust, my credit, my land. Then I made another list. Lawyers I knew. People I trusted. Not many, but enough. The sun had nearly set by the time I finished, casting golden light across the wood floors of the home that no longer belonged to me. I stood at the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze, and whispered to no one. "You sold my house, Seth, but you don't own me." And I meant every word. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pen, staring at a list that kept rewriting itself in my head. Not just names or dates or file numbers, but memories. Twisted now by the weight of betrayal. The birthday cakes I made from scratch. The college tuition checks I mailed without blinking. The late-night drives when Seth had too much to drink in high school and called me to pick him up. All of it stacked in silence. Erased by one signature I never gave. At some point before dawn, I walked outside. The orchard was quiet, blanketed in fog. A low mist clung to the ground like smoke from a fire that had already burned through everything. I walked the rows barefoot, like I used to when Bill was alive, and the nights got too hot to sleep. The earth felt colder now, heavier. I stopped in front of the oldest tree on the property, the one Bill and I had planted the year Seth was born. It was crooked, stubborn, always late to bloom. But it had survived every frost, every drought. Just like me, I pressed my palm to its bark. "You were supposed to inherit this," I whispered. "All of this. Not just the land, the story." The wind didn't answer, but something inside me did. That voice I'd spent years quieting. The one that asked hard questions. The one that said, "Stop waiting to be valued. You already know the truth." It spoke louder now. It said, He's not who you thought he was." And for the first time, I listened. For too long. I'd been hoping Seth would see me, not just as his mother, but as a person, a woman who had built something lasting, a woman who mattered. But he didn't see me. He saw a placeholder, a gatekeeper, an obstacle. I walked back to the house and took a shower, hot water pounding against my skin like rain on a tin roof. I got dressed in clean jeans and a denim work shirt, tied my hair back, and made a cup of strong coffee. Then I called the only person I trusted enough to say the words out loud. "Charlotte," my voice cracked. "Elva," she said, surprised. "It's 6:30 in the morning. Are you okay?" "No," I said, sitting down. "I'm not. I need help." Charlotte had been my best friend since the 3rd grade. We'd fought over a boy once in high school. He ended up marrying someone else and never fought again. She lived in Fresno now. Worked part-time for a legal aid office. We didn't talk much, but we never stopped being real. By 8:30, she was in my driveway with a binder full of paperwork, a thermos of coffee, and a look that said, "You're not going through this alone." We sat at the table where I'd once taught Seth how to count coins. "Let me see the transfer papers," she said. I slid them over, hands trembling. She flipped through them, pausing occasionally to make notes. Her jaw clenched. "This signature isn't yours," she said flatly. "Anyone who's seen your handwriting once would know that." I nodded. "And this notary, she's in Sacramento. Why would someone from Sacramento drive all the way here to notarize a property transfer she had nothing to do with?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Charlotte closed the binder slowly. "Elva, this is fraud." The word landed hard. Fraud. It made my stomach twist, but it also gave the ache in my chest a name. "He took everything." "Char," I said quietly. "The land. The house. And yesterday, he didn't even save me a seat at the table." Her eyes filled. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "I don't want pity. I want a plan." She smiled at that. "Now that's the Elva I know." We spent the rest of the day on calls, to the county assessor's office, to the state licensing board, even to a real estate fraud unit Charlotte knew personally. The case was messy, but not impossible. There were discrepancies, gaps, loopholes, and most importantly, Charlotte said, there was still time to act, time to take control, time to stop waiting for my son to treat me like I mattered. I had tried silence. I had tried kindness. I had tried believing he would do the right thing. But now I would do what I should have done the first time I was excluded. I would stand up, not with shouting, not with threats, but with intention, with the quiet, steady resolve of a woman who had lived through too much to be erased by her own blood. That night, after Charlotte left, I made myself dinner, grits, eggs, and toast. Simple, nourishing. No pie. I sat at the kitchen table again, this time facing the window. The moon was high, casting silver light across the fields that still carried my name in memory, even if no longer on paper. And I said the words aloud for the first time. I'm not doing this for revenge. It surprised me, because I meant it. This wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free. Let Seth keep the illusions. Let Rachel pretend her plan worked. Let their friends believe whatever story they were spinning. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. I was going to fight for my dignity. And that would be enough. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the quiet afterward. That space where everything should have felt loud and broken, but instead felt still, like when you finally stop searching for the crack in your favorite teacup and just decide to drink from it anyway, broken or not. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I'd done my whole life, waking early, feeding the chickens, tending to what little land I had left around the old house, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't trying to preserve what had been anymore. I was preparing for what would come next. The house was no longer mine, not on paper, but I still had 19 days, as per the county records, before the final eviction clause went into effect. 19 days to make a plan, to say goodbye without a funeral. Charlotte checked in daily, giving me updates. A fraud report had been filed. A civil case was in the works, but legal proceedings take time. Time I didn't want to waste sitting still. So I started cleaning. Not the kind of cleaning you do when guests are coming. The kind you do when you're shedding an old life. I pulled everything from the attic. Bill's old flannel shirts, Seth's baby clothes, journals from when I used to write poetry in the early hours before the farm took over my days. I burned the things I no longer needed quietly, in the metal drum behind the shed. Not out of anger, out of peace. Some memories aren't meant to be kept in drawers. They're meant to be honored and released. One afternoon, while scrubbing the kitchen floor, I found a small tin tucked behind the pantry wall, one Bill had hidden long ago during a remodel. Inside were 2 envelopes, one labeled, "If things ever get ugly," and the other with just my name on it. I opened the one with my name. It was a check, made out to me, $83,000. Savings he'd put away in a separate account, just in case, because you always plan for others. He'd written in messy block letters, and I want you to have something that's just yours. I sat on the pantry floor and cried, not because of the money, but because someone had once seen me fully, loved me not for what I gave, but for who I was. The next morning, I opened a new bank account in town, quietly, in my maiden name. No one needed to know. Then I made a call to a woman named Talia, who ran a senior co-op living community 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, just 10 little cottages arranged around a vegetable garden, shared tools, a book club, and Sunday potlucks. She said they had a cottage opening up in January. Rent was modest. Privacy was respected. And no one would ask questions about what you left behind. I put down the deposit that afternoon. The following week, I began boxing things up. Only what I needed. Only what still felt like mine. I didn't tell Seth. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't even tell the twins, because this wasn't a departure. It was a return to myself, to a kind of quiet they'd tried to take from me but never truly understood. One evening, while packing books, I came across a note Seth had written to me when he was 13. It said, "Mom, thank you for always showing up, even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't cry. I just folded it back into the pages of an old gardening book and packed it away, not to forget, but to remember that even he once knew who I was. Charlotte came by with a thermos and 3 manila folders. "You're going to be fine," she said, sitting across from me at the nearly empty table. "I already am," I replied. We toasted with instant coffee, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. A week later, I handed the keys to the house over to the county transition officer. He seemed confused, almost guilty, as if he expected a scene. I didn't give him one. I just said, "Tell them it's clean," and walked away. There's a kind of power in walking away before someone kicks you out. There's dignity in leaving with your head held high, even when your name's been erased from the title. There's healing in reclaiming what they thought you didn't need anymore. Your voice, your rhythm, your space. The first morning in the new cottage, I woke up before dawn. I walked to the garden barefoot. The air smelled like rosemary and warm dirt. I picked a sprig, held it to my nose, and smiled. A woman named Doris waved from her porch and called out, "You settling in, all right?" "I think so," I said. "Good. You look like a woman who knows what she's doing." I laughed. "Not the sad kind, the real kind." "I finally do," I said, and I meant it. The first Christmas in the cottage came quietly. No fuss, no lights on the roof. Just a simple wreath I made from rosemary and pine branches, and a candle I lit for Bill on the windowsill. I didn't decorate a tree. I didn't bake a dozen pies or wrap gifts or wait for a phone call that might never come. Instead, I woke early, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat on the porch, wrapped in a knit shawl, watching the frost melt off the garden rows. Chickens clucked a few houses over. Someone played old jazz from a crackling radio. Peace, that's what it was. Not excitement, not celebration, just peace. Around 10, Doris came by with a plate of cranberry scones. "Still warm," she said, placing them gently in my hands. "Merry Christmas." "Elva." "Merry Christmas," I said with a smile. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through town. The co-op had put up paper snowflakes in the window. Kids were drawing snowmen with sidewalk chalk. A woman passed me on the street and said, "You look radiant." Radiant. I hadn't heard that word in years. Not aimed at me. At least. I smiled and kept walking. By early evening, I was home again, reading an old mystery novel by the fire when I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I peeked through the curtain. It was Seth, standing next to his car with a wrapped box in one hand and a look on his face like he didn't know what planet he'd just landed on. I didn't open the door. Not right away. I let him knock twice. When I finally stepped out, I didn't say hello. I just looked at him. He swallowed hard. "You look good, Mom." I didn't answer. He held the box out. Rachel made cookies. The boys decorated them. I took the box, nodded, and said nothing. Seth looked around. "This place is nice, peaceful." "It is. I didn't know you were moving," he said. "You didn't ask." He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to come sooner. I just didn't know if I'd want to see you." I finished. He nodded. I sat on the porch rail and placed the box beside me. "What do you want?" "Seth." He looked down at his shoes. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." For everything. I didn't say anything. I let the silence do what words couldn't. He tried again. "I shouldn't have signed those papers. I shouldn't have let Rachel talk me into it. I thought I was protecting our future. But really, I just erased yours." That landed heavier than he expected. He looked at me, searching for some sign that I forgave him. I didn't give him one. "Instead," I said, "I built that house with your father, brick by brick. We planted every tree, paid every bill. That land was supposed to be yours one day, but you wanted it early and cheap." He flinched. "You didn't just take a house, Seth. You took my name off of something I spent my life building. You didn't even save me a seat at the table. You decided I didn't matter anymore." He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "I'm not here to rehash the past," I said. "I'm here because I've moved on, and you need to understand something." He waited. "I don't need your apology." His eyes widened. "I don't need a box of cookies or a wrapped gift or Christmas-colored regrets. What I needed was respect. And now, I have that from myself." He looked like he'd been slapped, but it wasn't anger that showed. It was grief. Grief for something he hadn't known he was losing until it was already gone. "I just wanted you to know that I miss you," he whispered. "I'm sure you do," I said, "but I don't miss the version of me you used to see. The silent woman who made pies and paid bills and took up no space." I stood up and walked back toward the door. "Elva," he said, using my name like it had weight for the first time in years. I turned slightly. "Merry Christmas, Seth." And then I closed the door, not in anger, not in punishment, just with the soft, unmistakable sound of a woman choosing herself. Inside, I placed the box of cookies on the table. I didn't open it. I didn't throw it away either. I simply lit the fire, poured a cup of tea, and returned to my book. Outside, I heard the car start. Then the sound faded down the road, and I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to. To anyone watching this who's ever been told you were too old to matter, let me ask you, what was your moment of quiet power? Not the time you yelled or proved someone wrong, but the time you simply walked away with dignity intact. Drop it in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear your revenge story told in silence.